So basically, I've always wanted to write comics. It was my dream from when I was a little kid. I had notebooks that I would sort of create superheroes and at that point I thought I might be an artist, but I learned pretty quickly that I was not going to be an artist. So I focused on writing. It was But in high school, I started looking into how one becomes a comic book writer, and it was very difficult. There wasn't a clear path, and there wasn't a place where I felt I could really learn how to do it. But I saw that many writers, including Neil Gaiman and some others, they started writing in prose, and then they made their way into comics. Neil Gaiman started with some journalism, and it was just like, okay, that's a path I understand. So I went to Sarah Lawrence College outside of New York, which has a very good writing program, and I started studying how to write prose. And while I was there, I took a class with a young short story writer named Scott Snyder. And at that point, he had never written a comic book before, but he had written a collection of short stories called Voodoo Heart. And he had recently written a superhero-themed short story called The 13th Egg that was in a collection called Who Can Save Us Now? And when I saw that, I knew, okay, then we have this kind of, this love of superheroes in common. So I knew I wanted to take a class with him, and we became close as we started working together. And we started talking outside of class, and he told me that he was pitching to both Marvel and Vertigo at DC Comics. And the thing he was pitching to Vertigo was American Vampire. And he sent me the original pitch document for American Vampire, and rather than just be like, oh, hey, this is like super cool, I sent him a 10-page critique of it. And in that 10-page critique, I laid into, okay, this is how to do this, that, and the other thing, and all of those critiques ended up making it into the actual series. And ever since then, Scott has sent me everything he's written. So Scott and I became Scott's writing assistant from that point on, and sort of a sounding board for all of his works. And as I graduated from college, I started working in advertising, and then when the New 52 started, Batman was a massive success, and they asked him if he could do 8 extra pages a month. But at that point, he was writing Swamp Thing, he was writing American Vampire, he was also doing an American Vampire miniseries, on the side of American Vampire. So he had too much on his plate, and he asked me, hey James, can you come and write, help write 8 pages a month of Batman? And I said yes, and things really got started from there.
And now we see in Poland.
Yeah.
But back to the beginning, what was your favorite comic book from your childhood?
That's a really good question. When I was a kid, my favorite comics were X-Men comics. I started, in the mid-90s, my dad would take me to the comic book store, and I would pick up little bits here and there, and one of the big things that was very important to me was the Age of Apocalypse storyline in the X-Men books, because at that point I hadn't read all of the crazy back history of the X-Men, so it was just it was immediately being thrown in the deep end with all these crazy characters, and they were different from the characters that were even the standard versions, but because it kind of referenced everything in the X-Men universe, it was kind of my perfect entry point. Around the same time, I also found the series Young Justice that starred Tim Drake and as Robin and all of his peers, and that became, every time I went into a comic book shop, I would find whatever issues they had of Young Justice and pick them up. I only finished that collection when I was finally in college. But those were kind of the most important things. And then eventually I started picking up trades and learning more about the backstory of all these characters. I read Kingdom Come, I read Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, Long Halloween, and then I started getting into all the Batman books through No Man's Land, Nightfall. Like I started just getting everything I could get my hands on. Once I get into a thing, I get kind of encyclopedic about it. I want to know everything about every single character, and I would pick up there are these guides that I don't know if they print them over here, but they're like essential guides to the characters that just have little like summaries of each and every characters that haven't shown up in 20 years, that because I read a piece about them in that book, I still have a fascination with them, and then I found out later that they showed up in one issue, but because they had an entry in there, I'm still obsessive about them.
That's how I got into the ambush bag. And in quick question also, who is your favorite X-Men?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. Honestly, like I've always liked the kind of struggling leader type characters, so I do have a very strong connection to Cyclops, but honestly, probably my favorite character from the whole history of the X-Men is Kitty Pryde.
Good choice. Really? I'm a Gambit.
Oh yeah, Gambit's also great.
On the topic of X-Men actually, when I was preparing for this meeting, I discovered that you are as unique as a unicorn actually, because you are a male, openly bisexual comic book writer, and you were working on the solo series of one of the most popular, probably, maybe the only male bisexual openly comic book mainstream characters of John Constantine. That is one of my favorites in the whole world. So I just wanted to ask you how it happened that you started to write Constantine.
Honestly, it started, and it was a strange story because back when they first announced the whole new line that became it was called DCU YOU, and it was a new line of books that honestly did not do so well for DC, and is one of the reasons that Rebirth happened last year, because it sort of took a bunch of characters and did kind of off-brand takes on them. It allowed us to do kind of new things, and one of the things that I was originally going to do for that series was a book called Dark Universe, which was going to kind of be a modern books of magic style book that sort of covered all of the aspects of the magical DC universe, and Constantine was viewed as kind of the supporting book for that title. So I was going to write Dark Universe, and Ming Doyle was going to draw that book, and then Ming Doyle was going to write Constantine with Riley Rossmo on art. And then it became something where Ming asked me, after developing these series for a while, if I would help her write, because she's primarily an artist and she hadn't had a lot of experience scripting, if I would help her write the book. But then DC had their own ideas of what they wanted to do with Dark Universe. They had their whole, a whole separate thing, and Ming and I had gotten more and more excited about what we were planning to do with Constantine.